Welcome, friends, to Liam O'Connor's Sleep Stories, where we drift on the gentle waves of soothing tales. If you're new here, give a like if you cherish calm. Subscribe to join our journey, and drop a comment. Where are you tuning in from today? Perhaps the shores of Ireland, or a cozy sofa somewhere far away. Your stories inspire us today. We journey to the sea, where Ellen, a widow, lives her days as quietly as the tide, with 3 chapters and a conclusion. This tale will wrap you in the sounds of waves and the warmth of memories. Settle in. Close your eyes and let the sea carry you to sleep. Now, take a deep breath in through your nose, feeling the air cool and fresh fill your chest. Hold it for a moment. Let it settle like a wave pausing at the shore. Then release it slowly through your lips. Let the tension drift away with the tide. Listen to the sea, its soft murmur washing over you like a gentle hand smoothing the sand. Feel your body sink deeper into your chair or bed, the weight easing with each breath. Imagine you are by the ocean, the salt air brushing your skin. The waves roll in, slow and steady, their rhythm a heartbeat of the earth. Hear the gulls, their cries, faint, carried on the breeze. See the horizon where the sea meets the sky, a line soft and endless. Let your thoughts float away like seaweed drifting with the current. No hurry, no rush, just the sea and you. Breathe again, in and out. Mathematics, feel the calm spreading from your chest to your arms to your legs. The cottage is near, its walls weathered, its windows glowing softly. We'll enter soon, but for now, projectile rest in this quiet. Let the sea hold you. Ellen awoke to the soft whisper of waves, their gentle rhythm seeping through the cracks of her weathered seaside cottage perched on Ireland's rugged coast. The morning light, pale, untender, filtered through curtains of rough linen, their edges yellowed by years of salt-laden breeze. She lay still, the bed creaking softly beneath her, its mattress sagging, worn by decades of rest. The blanket woven from the wool of local sheep draped lightly over her shoulders, its texture a familiar comfort, carrying the faint scent of heather. She listened, the sea's murmur, blending with the distant cry of a gull, a sound as old as the cliffs themselves. Slowly, she turned her head, the pillow cool against her cheek, its cotton case smoothed by time and gazed towards the window, where the glass, streaked with salt, framed a view of the grey ocean stretching endlessly. A soft breeze slipped through a gap, carrying the briny tang of seaweed and the earthy dampness of the shore. She lingered there, her breath steady, photographers of the sea filling the room like a lullaby from her childhood, when Patrick, her husband, would hum by the hearth. She smiled, a small, private thing, as the memory washed over her, like a wave, gentle and warm. With a slow effort, she rose, her joints protesting with a gentle ache, the wooden floor cool under her bare feet, its planks worn smooth by years of quiet steps. The grain of the wood felt familiar, its roughness a map of time. Slipping on her slippers, faded blue, their soles softened by use, she shuffled towards the window. Each step is a deliberate pause. Plus, the floorboards creaked, the crowned, a soft song, the nothing everything of weight, beneath her weight, and she paused to steady herself against the wall, its plaster cool and slightly damp from the sea air. At the window, she pressed her palm against the frame, its paint chipped, rough under her fingers, and peered out. The sea sparkled faintly, its surface broken by white caps dancing under the pale sky. Beyond, the cliffs rose, their edges jagged, cloaked in moss and gorse. A lone cormorant perched, its wings spread to dry, a dark silhouette against the horizon. She watched the bird's stillness mirroring her own, and felt a peace settle deep within her chest. The breeze carried a hint of rain, and she inhaled the air, filling her lungs with the sea's embrace. Turning away, she moved toward the kitchen, the cottage small but warm, its walls lined with shelves holding jars of preserves and faded photographs. The light shifted, casting shadows across the room, and she traced a finger along the edge of a frame where Patrick smiled, his face young, his eyes bright. She paused, the memory lingering like the scent of the seaweed drifting in. In the kitchen, she filled a kettle, the taps trickle, a soft echo of the sea outside. The metal felt cold against her hands. As she set it on the stove, the click of the burner, a quiet punctuation, followed by the low hum of heat rising. She reached for a tin, its lid creaking open, revealing tea leaves, fragrant with age, and spooned them into a pot, her movements slow, deliberate, like a ritual. Possessed, the lid clinked softly as she set it down, and she sat at the table, its wood scarred, marked with rings she traced with an idle finger, lost in its texture. The kettle whistled gently, a sound that invited, not startled, and she poured the water, the steam rising in faint curls, warming her hands. The aroma of tea filled the air, earthy and comforting. She added a splash of milk from a small jug, its porcelain chipped but cherished, and stirred, the spoon clinking softly against the cup. Each sip was slow, the warmth spreading through her as she gazed out the window, the sea, a constant companion.
its waves a steady heartbeat. After a while, she rose again, the chair scraping gently against the floor, and gathered a basket woven from reeds, its handle worn by years of use. She stepped outside, the door creaking open, and the sea air rushed to meet her, cool and invigorating. The path to the shore was uneven, its stones moss-covered, and she walked with care, the basket swinging lightly at her side. The sound of the waves grew louder, their rhythm guiding her steps as the cottage faded behind. At the water's edge, she bent slowly, her knees protesting, and gathered seaweed, its strands slippery, cool against her hands. The tide lapped at her boots, its touch gentle, and she worked, filling the basket, the sea's gifts a part of her day. She straightened the basket, heavy, and looked out the horizon, a line of silver under the softening sky. A memory surfaced of Patrick, collecting seaweed, his laughter ringing over the waves, and she smiled. The past blending with the present in the quiet of the morning. The sea whispered on, its voice a lullaby, and Ellen stood, the basket in hand, the cottage waiting as the day began to unfold. Slowly, she turned back, the path ahead, a gentle return to her world. By the window, by the sea, Ellen stood, tired at the cottage door, the basket of seaweed heavy in her hands. Its woven reeds rough against her palms, the sea air, cool and briny, brushed her face as she stepped outside, the wooden threshold creaking softly beneath her feet. The morning light had softened into a gentle glow, casting long shadows across the stone path leading away from her home. She paused. The door left ajar, its hinges whispering a faint protest, and breathed deeply, the scent of salt and wild grass filling her lungs. Her dog, Finn, a small terrier with a coat of wiry grey, trotted to her side, his paws clicking against the stones. His tail wagged slowly, a gentle sway, and she reached down, her fingers brushing his soft ears, feeling the warmth of his presence. "Come along, Finn," she murmured, her voice low, carried away by the breeze. The basket swung lightly as she adjusted its weight, and they began their walk towards the cliffs. The path rose gently, its stones uneven, covered with patches of emerald moss. The sound of the sea grew louder, its waves crashing against the rocks below, a steady rhythm that guided her steps. Finn scampered ahead, his nose to the ground, sniffing at tufts accomplice of heather, their purple blooms nodding in the wind. Ellen followed, her slippers scuffing softly against the path, each step a deliberate pause, the cool air wrapping around her like a shawl. The cliffs loomed ahead, their edges jagged, carved by centuries of wind and water. She reached the edge and stopped, gazing out scatter where the ocean stretched endlessly, its surface shimmering under the midday sun. A few gulls circled, their cries faint, blending with the waves,
and she leaned against a low stone wall,
its surface worn smooth by countless hands. The basket rested at her feet and she closed her eyes, letting the sound of the sea wash over her. A memory surfaced, slow and clear, of Patrick standing here, his broad shoulders turned toward the horizon. His voice, deep and warm, had called her name as they watched a storm roll in. The rain had come, soft at first, then steady, soaking their coats, and they'd laughed, the sound lost in the wind. She opened her eyes, the memory fading, but the sea remained, its waves a constant companion. Finn barked softly, drawing her attention, and she looked down to see him pawing at a patch of grass where a small shell lay half buried. She bent slowly, her knees aching, and picked it up, its surface smooth, cool to the touch. The shell's spiral reminded her of the patterns in Patrick's fishing nets, hung to dry on the cottage wall. She slipped it into her pocket, the fabric rustling softly, and straightened, the basket lifting with a gentle tug. They walked on the path, narrowing as it hugged the cliff's edge. The grass grew wilder, its blades brushing against her legs, and she felt the earth firm beneath her, a steady anchor. Finn darted ahead, chasing a butterfly, its wings a flash of orange against the green. She watched, a smile tugging at her lips, the simple joy of his play, easing the quiet within her. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed, and she paused again to adjust her shawl, its wool frayed but warm. The sea below churned slightly, its waves breaking against the rocks, sending up sprays that caught the light like tiny rainbows. She stood there, letting the moment stretch out, the sound of the water a lullaby wrapping around her like a soft embrace. After a while, she turned, top, the cottage visible in the distance, its chimney sending a thin wisp of smoke into the air. Finn returned, his tongue lolling, and she patted his head, feeling the roughness of his fur. "Time to go back," she whispered, her voice blending with the wind. The basket swung as she began the return, each step slow, the path familiar, leading her home. Ellen sat by the hearth, the cottage growing dim as the afternoon faded into evening. The fire crackled softly, its flames dancing, casting a warm glow across the worn stone floor. The sea outside had quieted, its waves a gentle murmur seeping through the walls, carrying the scent of salt and dusk. She rested in a chair, its cushions sagging, the wood creaking beneath her weight. The shawl draped over her shoulders felt soft, its wool warmed by the day's walk. The basket still held the seaweed and sprigs of thyme, their earthy scent mingling with the smoke from the fire. She reached down, her fingers brushing the rough reeds, and lifted a strand of seaweed, its texture slippery, cool against her skin. A memory stirred, slow and gentle, of Patrick sorting seaweed, his hands steady, preparing it for the garden. She smiled, the image lingering like a shadow on the wall. The kettle sat on the stove, its metal cool now, and she rose, her joints aching softly, the floor cool under her slippers. She shuffled toward the shelf where a jar of honey glowed amber in the firelight. The glass felt smooth as she unscrewed the lid, the scent sweet, filling the air. She spooned a dollop into a cup, the honey slow, dripping like molasses, and poured tea, the steam rising in soft curls, warming her hands. Sitting again, she sipped, the warmth spreading through her chest. The fire popped, sending a spark onto the hearth, and she watched its light flicker across the room. The walls lined with shelves held treasures, a chipped mug, a photograph faded with time, his arm around her, their faces young, their smiles bright. Finn lay by the hearth, his grey coat catching the glow, his breathing slow and even, a soft rhythm blending with the sea. She reached down, her hand resting on his back, feeling the rise and fall of his breath. "Good boy," she whispered, her voice a thread, lost in the quiet. The dog's ears twitched, and he sighed, a contented sound that eased her heart. The evening deepened, the sky outside turning to velvet, dotted with stars. She rose again, the chair creaking, and moved to the window, the glass cool against her fingertips. The sea reflected the starlight, a shimmering path stretching toward the horizon. A memory surfaced, of nights when Patrick would point to the constellations, his voice low, naming them one by one. She followed his gaze, in her mind, tracing the patterns, as if he were there. Returning to the hearth, she added a log, the wood crackling as it caught. The heat washed over her, and she settled back, the shawl slipping to her lap. She closed her eyes, letting the sounds of the fire and the sea weave together a lullaby for the night. The thyme still in the basket released its scent, sharp and grounding, and she breathed it in, the day's journey settling within her. After a while, she reached for a needle and thread. The basket holding a patch of fabric, faded blue like her slippers. She began to sew, her hands moving slowly, the needle piercing the cloth with a soft click. The rhythm was steady, a quiet task that filled the silence. She stitched, a memory, of mending Patrick's coat, his laughter ringing as she worked. The thread looped and pulled, each stitch a link to the past. The fire burned lower, its embers glowing a soft red against the dark. Finn stirred, stretching his legs, and she patted him, abolishing, the warmth of his side. The sea whispered on, its voice a constant, and she leaned back, the chair creaking softly. The room grew still, the night wrapping around her like a blanket. The stars outside watched over the cottage, and she drifted into the quiet of her thoughts. A knock came faint at the door, and she opened her eyes, the sound breaking the stillness. She rose, the floor cool, and shuffled slowly, the latch clicking as she opened it. A neighbour stood, a young woman, her arms full of fresh bread. "For you, Ellen," challenged, flattering, her voice gentle. The warmth of the bread filled the air, and Ellen smiled, taking it, the crust rough against her fingers. They spoke a few words about the sea and the weather, the woman's voice a soft counterpoint to the waves. Then she left, the door closing softly, and Ellen returned to the hearth. The bread sat on the table, its scent mingling with the thyme. She broke a piece, the crumb soft, and ate slowly, the taste warm, a comfort for the night. The fire dwindled, the embers fading, and Ellen sat, the bread in hand, the sea's murmur, a lullaby, carrying her towards sleep. The stars shone through the window, their light a guide, and she closed her eyes. The cottage quiet, the day's end a gentle close. The memory of Patrick lingered